In a world that constantly pulls at your attention, peace is no longer something you find. It is something you train. Peace is often misunderstood as something that comes from silence, from perfect conditions, or from having everything in life aligned exactly as you want. But in reality, peace is a skill. It is something you build through consistent inner work. Each day presents small challenges, delays, disagreements, unexpected changes. And these moments become your training ground. If you only seek peace when life is easy, you will rarely experience it. But if you begin to train your mind in ordinary, imperfect moments, you slowly develop a kind of stability that does not depend on external circumstances. This training requires awareness. It requires noticing when your thoughts begin to spiral, when emotions start to rise, and gently bringing yourself back to stillness. Over time, this practice strengthens your ability to remain calm even when life feels chaotic. Most people believe that their stress and frustration come from what happens around them. But if you observe closely, you will notice that two people can face the same situation and experience it very differently. This is because the situation itself is neutral. It is your interpretation and reaction that gives it meaning. When something goes wrong, the mind quickly creates stories. This shouldn't happen. This is unfair. Why me? These thoughts intensify your emotional response and disturb your peace. But when you train yourself to see things as they are without immediately labeling them as good or bad, you create space between the event and your reaction. In that space, you gain the ability to choose a calmer, more balanced response. This shift may seem small, but it changes everything about how you experience life. One of the biggest reasons people lose their peace is because they give too much importance to everything. Every opinion feels personal, every inconvenience feels significant, and every discomfort feels urgent. But not everything deserves your attention or your energy. When you begin to understand this, you start to let go of the need to react to every little thing. Someone's careless words, a minor delay, or a small mistake no longer have the same power over you. You become more selective with your focus. This does not mean you become indifferent or careless. It means you become intentional. You learn to ask yourself, is this worth disturbing my peace? And often the answer is no. By choosing where to invest your energy, you protect your inner state and prevent unnecessary stress from taking over your mind. There is a quiet strength in the ability to pause. In a world that encourages instant reactions, the simple act of stopping for a moment can feel unnatural, but it is within this pause that your awareness grows. When something triggers you, your first impulse may be to respond immediately, defend yourself, argue back, or act on emotion. But if you take a brief moment to breathe and observe what you are feeling, you interrupt this automatic pattern. This pause allows you to respond with clarity instead of reacting with impulse. It gives you time to understand your emotions rather than being controlled by them. With practice, this becomes a habit. You begin to notice your triggers more quickly, and your responses become more thoughtful and composed. The pause becomes a powerful tool, one that helps you maintain control, even in difficult situations. Life will always present things that are beyond your control. People will act in ways you do not expect. Circumstances will change without warning, and outcomes will not always match your efforts. Trying to control all of this only leads to frustration and exhaustion. But there is one thing that always remains within your control: how you respond. When you shift your focus from controlling the outside world to mastering your inner world, you experience a deep sense of freedom. You no longer depend on others to behave a certain way in order to feel calm. You no longer need everything to go perfectly to remain steady. Instead, you develop resilience. You learn to adapt, to accept, and to move forward without carrying unnecessary emotional weight. This does not mean you stop caring or stop taking action. It means your actions come from a place of clarity rather than emotional turbulence over time. This way of living creates a quiet confidence within you, a sense that no matter what happens, you can handle it without losing your peace. Most people move through life believing that what they feel is a direct result of what happens to them. If something goes wrong, they assume the situation itself is the cause of their frustration. If someone speaks harshly, they believe the words are the reason for their anger. But if you observe more carefully, you begin to notice a subtle but powerful truth. The event itself is only the beginning. What follows inside your mind is what truly shapes your experience. Between what happens and how you feel, there is a process. It is quiet, fast, and often unconscious. The mind immediately begins to interpret. It labels the situation as good or bad, fair or unfair, acceptable or unacceptable. It compares what is happening to what you expected. It brings in past experiences, fears, and assumptions. Within seconds, a simple moment becomes something much heavier, not because of the event itself, but because of the meaning you have attached to it. Consider how often this happens in daily life. A message is ignored and the mind says, "I am being disrespected." A plan changes and the mind says, "This is ruining everything." A small mistake occurs and the mind says, "This should not have happened." These thoughts appear automatically, and because they feel immediate and real, they are rarely questioned. But it is these interpretations that create tension, not the situation itself. When you begin to see this clearly, something shifts. You start to realize that your reaction is not fixed. It is not something that must happen in a certain way. It is something that can be observed, understood, and gradually transformed. This awareness creates space. And in that space, there is choice. Without this awareness, the mind operates on habit. It reacts based on conditioning, repeating the same patterns again and again. If you are used to feeling irritated by delays, every delay will trigger irritation. If you are used to taking things personally, every comment will feel like an attack. The pattern continues, not because it is necessary, but because it is familiar. The mind prefers what it knows, even if it creates discomfort. But when you slow down and pay attention, you begin to notice these patterns as they arise. You catch the thought forming. You see the judgment before it fully takes over. And in that moment, you have an opportunity to respond differently. Instead of immediately believing the thought, you can question it. Is this really as serious as it seems? Is this interpretation the only possible one? What if there is another way to look at this? This does not mean you deny your emotions or pretend that everything is fine. It means you stop feeding unnecessary reactions. You allow the initial feeling to arise, but you do not build a story around it. You do not add layers of judgment and resistance. You simply observe what is happening, both outside and inside. With practice, this changes the way you experience even challenging situations. A delay becomes just a delay, not a personal inconvenience. A disagreement becomes a difference in perspective, not a threat. A mistake becomes part of the process, not a failure. The external events may remain the same, but your internal experience becomes lighter, more stable, and less reactive. There is also a deeper understanding that begins to develop. You start to see that your need for things to be a certain way is often what creates tension. When reality does not match your expectations, the mind resists. It says, this should be different. And in that resistance, discomfort grows. But when you learn to accept what is happening, even if it is not ideal, the resistance softens. Acceptance does not mean agreement. It simply means you stop fighting reality in your mind. As this awareness becomes stronger, your reactions naturally begin to change. You no longer feel the need to respond to everything immediately. You become less defensive, less impulsive, and more composed. Situations that once disturbed you begin to lose their intensity. You still notice them, but they no longer control you in the same way. This is where a deeper sense of calm begins to emerge. Not because life has become easier, but because your relationship with it has changed. You are no longer caught in automatic reactions. You are no longer overwhelmed by every small disturbance. Instead, you move through life with a quieter mind, one that sees clearly and responds with intention rather than habit. One of the most subtle yet powerful shifts you can make in your life is learning that not everything deserves your energy. Most people move through their days reacting to everything that catches their attention. A comment, a tone of voice, a delay, a mistake, an opinion. Each one pulls at their focus, and without realizing it, they give away their inner stability piece by piece. By the end of the day, they feel drained, not because of one major problem, but because of 100 small reactions that slowly consumed their peace. The mind has a tendency to treat everything as important. It does not naturally filter what truly matters and what does not. If someone says something slightly negative, the mind holds onto it. If something does not go as planned, the mind replays it again and again. This constant engagement creates noise. And the more noise there is, the harder it becomes to remain calm and clear. But when you begin to step back and observe, you start to notice a pattern. Many of the things that disturb you are temporary, minor, and ultimately meaningless in the larger picture of your life. Yet in the moment, they feel urgent. They feel like they demand your attention. This is where awareness becomes important. You begin to question the automatic importance your mind assigns to every situation. Instead of reacting immediately, you pause and ask yourself a simple question. Is this worth my energy? This question alone can change your entire experience. Because when you truly consider it, you realize that most things are not worth disturbing your inner state. A careless remark from someone who does not understand you, a small inconvenience that will be forgotten tomorrow, an opinion that does not define who you are. None of these deserve the same level of attention as something that truly matters. This does not mean you ignore everything or suppress your emotions. It means you become intentional. You choose where your attention goes instead of letting it be pulled in every direction. There is a difference between being aware of something and becoming emotionally involved in it. You can notice a situation without allowing it to take control of your mind. When you stop giving energy to everything, something interesting happens. The things that once seemed overwhelming begin to lose their intensity. They still exist, but they no longer feel as heavy. This is because your energy is no longer feeding them. Attention is powerful. Whatever you focus on grows in your mind. When you continuously think about a problem, it becomes bigger than it actually is. But when you choose not to engage with it, it gradually fades. Many people struggle with this because they feel the need to respond to everything. They believe that staying silent means weakness, or that letting something go means accepting disrespect. But true strength lies in knowing what deserves a response and what does not. Not every situation requires your reaction. Sometimes the most powerful response is no response at all. There is also a sense of freedom that comes with this understanding. When you are no longer affected by every small thing, you move through life with more ease. You are not constantly pulled into unnecessary conflicts or emotional disturbances. Your mind becomes quieter, and with that quietness comes clarity. You start to see things as they are, without exaggeration or distortion. This way of living requires practice. At first, the mind will continue to react out of habit. It will try to pull you back into old patterns. But each time you choose not to engage, you weaken those patterns. Each time you let something go, you strengthen your ability to remain centered. Over time, this becomes natural. You no longer have to force yourself to stay calm. It becomes your default state. You also begin to value your energy differently. You realize that your attention is limited, and where you invest it shapes your experience of life. Instead of wasting it on distractions and negativity, you direct it toward things that bring growth, understanding, and peace. This shift is not about avoiding life, but about engaging with it more wisely. As you continue this practice, you notice that your reactions become fewer but more meaningful. When something truly matters, you have the clarity and energy to respond appropriately. But for everything else, you remain steady. You are aware but not disturbed, present but not overwhelmed. And in that state, peace is no longer something you search for. It becomes something you naturally maintain. There is a moment, often so small that it goes unnoticed, where everything can change. It is the space between what happens and what you do next. Most people move too quickly to see it. Something triggers them, and almost instantly they react. Words are spoken without thought. Emotions take control, and actions follow patterns that have been repeated many times before. This speed feels natural, but it is also the reason why many people feel out of control in their own lives. The ability to pause interrupts this automatic cycle. It creates a gap where awareness can enter. At first, this pause may only last a second, but even that is enough to shift your experience. In that brief moment, you are no longer completely identified with your reaction. You are observing it. You are seeing what is happening inside you, instead of being carried away by it. When something triggers you, the body often responds before the mind fully understands what is happening. There may be tension, a quickening of the breath, a rush of emotion. The instinct is to release this energy immediately, usually through words or actions. But when you train yourself to pause, you allow this initial surge to settle. You give yourself time to feel what is arising without needing to act on it right away. This is where clarity begins to develop. Instead of reacting based on the first impulse, you begin to understand the emotion behind it. You notice whether it is anger, fear, frustration, or insecurity. You start to see the difference between what is actually happening and what your mind is adding to the situation. This awareness makes your response more intentional rather than automatic. The pause also weakens the influence of old habits. Much of your behavior is shaped by patterns that have been repeated over time. If you have always responded to criticism with defensiveness, that pattern will continue unless something interrupts it. The pause becomes that interruption. It gives you the opportunity to choose a different response, even if it feels unfamiliar at first. In many situations, a reaction may feel justified. You may feel that you have every right to respond immediately, to defend yourself, or to prove a point. But not every justified reaction is a wise one. Acting on impulse often leads to outcomes that create more tension rather than resolve it. The pause allows you to consider the consequences of your response. It gives you the space to ask, will this reaction bring clarity, or will it create more conflict? As you practice this, you begin to notice that not every thought needs to be expressed, and not every emotion needs to be acted upon. Some thoughts pass quickly if you do not hold on to them. Some emotions lose their intensity if you do not feed them with immediate reaction. The pause allows this natural process to happen. It also strengthens your sense of control. When you are constantly reacting, it feels as though your emotions are controlling you. But when you pause, you shift that dynamic. You begin to see that you have a choice in how you respond. This does not mean you suppress your emotions or ignore them. It means you respond to them with awareness rather than being driven by them. Over time, this practice changes the rhythm of your mind. Instead of rushing from one reaction to another, you move more steadily. Your thoughts become clearer. Your emotions become more balanced, and your actions become more deliberate. You begin to carry a sense of calm, even in situations that would have previously disturbed you. The pause is not something that requires special conditions. It can be practiced anywhere, at any time. In a conversation, before replying, in a moment of frustration, before reacting, in uncertainty, before making a decision. Each time you use it, you strengthen your awareness and your ability to remain centered. As this becomes more natural, you start to experience a different kind of power. It is not the power of controlling others or forcing outcomes. It is the quiet power of self-mastery. You are no longer pulled in every direction by external events. You remain grounded, aware, and in control of your inner state. Even when the world around you is unpredictable, there is a deep frustration that comes from trying to control things that were never in your control to begin with. Much of this frustration is so common that it feels normal. People expect others to behave in certain ways, expect situations to unfold according to their plans, and expect outcomes to match their efforts. When these expectations are not met, the mind reacts with resistance. It questions, complains, and searches for ways to force things back into alignment. But the more you try to control what is outside of you, the more you lose stability within yourself. Life does not move according to your preferences. People have their own thoughts, their own emotions, and their own ways of acting that are shaped by experiences you may never fully understand. Situations change without warning. Outcomes are influenced by countless factors beyond your awareness. When you attach your peace to these external elements, it becomes fragile. It depends on everything going the way you want, and that is something that can never be guaranteed. There is a shift that happens when you begin to see this clearly. Instead of focusing on controlling the external, you start to direct your attention inward. You begin to notice that while you cannot control what happens, you always have influence over how you respond. This realization does not come all at once. It develops gradually through observation and experience. You start to recognize moments where your reaction created unnecessary tension, and moments where a calmer response preserved your peace. Your response is the one place where your power remains constant. No matter what situation you are in, there is always a space where you can choose how to think, how to feel, and how to act. This choice may not always feel easy, especially when emotions are strong, but it is always present. The more you become aware of it, the more accessible it becomes. When you stop trying to control everything around you, you begin to experience a sense of relief. The constant pressure to manage every outcome begins to fade. You no longer feel responsible for how others behave or how every situation unfolds. This does not mean you become passive or indifferent. It means you engage with life more wisely. You take action where it is meaningful, and you let go where it is not. This approach changes the way you handle challenges. Instead of reacting with frustration when things go wrong, you focus on what can be done in the moment. Your energy is directed toward solutions rather than resistance. You become more adaptable, more flexible, and less affected by sudden changes. This adaptability is a form of strength. It allows you to move through difficulties without becoming overwhelmed by them. There is also a deeper sense of independence that develops when your peace no longer depends on external conditions. You are no longer easily disturbed. You do not need others to act a certain way for you to feel calm. You do not need situations to be perfect for you to remain steady. This creates a kind of inner freedom that is not easily shaken. At the same time, you become more aware of your responsibilities. While you cannot control everything, you are responsible for your actions, your decisions, and your mindset. This awareness brings clarity. Instead of blaming circumstances or other people for how you feel, you begin to take ownership of your inner state. This ownership is not a burden, it is empowering. It reminds you that your experience is not entirely determined by what happens outside of you. As you continue to practice this way of thinking, your reactions begin to change naturally. You become less impulsive, less reactive, and more composed. Situations that once triggered strong emotions no longer have the same effect. You still notice them, but they do not control you. There is a space between what happens and how you respond, and in that space, you remain steady. This steadiness does not mean you will never feel challenged. It means that even when challenges arise, you do not lose yourself in them. You remain grounded. You remain aware. And from that awareness, your actions become more thoughtful and aligned with who you want to be. In the end, peace is not something distant or unreachable. It is something you build moment by moment through the way you see, the way you choose, and the way you respond. Life will continue to move in its own direction, bringing both ease and difficulty, clarity and confusion. But your strength lies in not being carried away by every shift. When you understand your reactions, protect your energy, create space before responding, and let go of the need to control everything, something within you becomes steady. You begin to move through life with less resistance and more awareness. The noise around you may not disappear, but it no longer defines your inner state. This is the quiet discipline of a peaceful mind. It does not demand attention. It does not seek validation. It simply remains grounded, no matter what comes or goes. And when you reach this state, you realize that Being unbothered is not about avoiding life. It is about mastering how you live it.